Following the War of 1812, we know the United States was entering a new era, one where they would be able to break free of their European chains and take control of their own destiny. That destiny in many people's minds resided in the West. A New York newspaper editor named James O'Sullivan captured this spirit in a two-word phrase, manifest destiny. He and others like him believed that it was his generation's duty to spread American democracy throughout the continent. These people also believed that it was their God-given right to do so. By the time that O'Sullivan wrote this phrase, though, the United States had just annexed Texas in 1845, and 3 years later the U.S. would lay claim to the rest of the West, from present-day Washington to the southern borders of California, New Mexico, and Arizona. This would be accomplished in large part due to the vision of James K. Polk, the president of the time, using military might and persuasive negotiating skills. However, there are several Americans that contributed to Polk's vision and aspirations of their own. With desire and will, these leaders of a new America paved the way for American expansion. Much of the American expansion was in large part due to the creation of the Texas colony. During the 1820s, a small group of settlers wished to create a colony in the Mexican state of Texas. Led by Stephen A. Austin, whose father had purchased a large amount of land from Mexico, settlers began moving into the colony quickly. In a matter of 3 years, 25,000 settlers had come to Texas. This pace of growth worried the Mexican government, and they put a stop to the American emigration. Mexico was concerned with the lack of respect for their culture, rules, and customs. These Americans who had moved into Texas were rebellious by nature and often refused to abide by Mexican requests. When Stephen A. Austin went to Mexico City to negotiate an end to this immigration policy, President Santa Anna refused Austin and arrested him. During the 2 years in prison, Texans began preparing for revolution. Hearing of the revolt, President Santa Anna led his men to the city of San Antonio, where the Texans holed up in a Spanish mission named the Alamo, where the Mexicans launched an attack that lasted several days. And on the 12th day, Santa Anna attacked the fort, killing everybody inside. His army would march on in an attempt to end the revolution entirely. However, the further he led his men into Texas, the more danger Santa Anna put his men in. Finally, the city of San Jacinto, Santa Anna's men were the victims of a surprise attack led by General Sam Houston. Santa Anna was taken prisoner, and the Texans claimed the upper hand. They negotiated with the Mexican government and released Santa Anna in exchange for Texas independence. This was a great victory for the Texans, who had successfully fought for the land that they loved. 10 years later, in 1845, Texas would become the 28th state of the United States. During the process of making Texas a state, President Polk knew that he was likely to get pushback from Mexico. Not long after Texas became a state, there was a border dispute that ended violently, with Mexican soldiers shooting 16 Americans as they patrolled the disputed border. This angered government leaders in Washington, and President Polk urged Congress to declare war. The war with Mexico was an invasion by the American military. General Stephen Kearny led his men into New Mexico and claimed it easily. Explorer John Fremont led his men into California, and much like Kearny, was able to claim victory swiftly. However, as Americans turned south, they faced more resistance from Santa Anna and his men. General Zachary Taylor led the Americans to the city of Buena Vista, where they faced off against Santa Anna for several days in a standstill. Both sides suffered great losses, but Santa Anna moved his men to retreat. Another group of Americans, led by General Winfield Scott, began their march towards Mexico City. Just outside the city, at the castle of Chapultepec, Scott and his men defeated Mexican forces. The 1,500 Mexican soldiers and cadets laid down their weapons and surrendered, and soon thereafter the Americans captured Mexico City. A few months later, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War and created a new set of borders. America agreed to pay Mexico $15 million in exchange for territory that now makes up the states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Nevada. This is known as the Mexican Cession. 5 years later, a railroad executive named James Gadsden would negotiate the purchase of more Mexican territory in what is known as the Gadsden Purchase. Gadsden purchased a small strip of land south of the Mexican Cession for $10 million. It was flat and perfect for building a railroad through the Southwest. Although the expansion of territory is a heroic period in American history, it is also a dark one. The invasion of Mexico and the killing of thousands of Mexicans along the way cannot be ignored. Although America benefited greatly from this expansion, it did come at a price.